I'm Lieutenant Commander Kate Cunningham, and today I'm going to talk about the Surface Department Head Board. I'll cover the following topics: announcement message, determining looks and eligibility, special look requests, example correspondence, how to submit correspondence to the board process, selection announcement, selection and non-selection impacts, and historic department head selection metrics. The fiscal year 20 Department Head Board was held in early June. Due to the COVID pandemic, the fiscal year 21 Department Head Board was held in early September. The fiscal year 22 board was held in late July, and the fiscal year 23 board this year will be held at the beginning of August. Board timing is largely based on board space availability, so please read the annual Department Head Board announcement message for the exact convening each year. The Department Head Board announcement typically gets released in February or March via message traffic as an all-nav SWO and can be found on our My Navy HR website here. The message will contain the exact dates of the board and who is eligible. Unless approved for a delayed look, an officer receives their first look for department head at YCS 3. If not selected on first look, they'll receive their second look at YCS 4, and if not selected at that second look, they'll receive their third and final look at YCS 5. For the fiscal year 23 Department Head Board this August, your Group 19 will have their first look, your Group 18 will have their second, and your Group 17 will have their third and final look. Officers not yet qualified SWO will not be considered board eligible, but will still have that look count unless they have a delayed look request approved. There are two types of special look requests that can be submitted to administrative boards: delayed looks and special additional looks. Delayed looks are approved by the PERS 41 director. If a delayed look is submitted but not approved by the PERS 41 director, it will go in front of the board for a vote to approve or deny. All special additional looks get approved or denied by the board. A delayed look must be able to demonstrate an officer was uniquely disadvantaged compared to their peers. This unique disadvantage notionally puts the officer in jeopardy of failing to screen at their scheduled look. Examples of delayed looks that have been approved in the past have largely been related to exceptional circumstances resulting in an officer not yet receiving their SWO pin or a department head afloat recommendation. A late community transfer may already be a lieutenant junior grade or lieutenant, but based on their transfer timing into the SWO community, they may only be a few months into their first tour, making them a good candidate for a delayed look. Reservists may be in a similar situation depending on their activation timing and rank. If you believe you are in a situation that would qualify for a delayed look, please reach out to your detailer. If you qualify for a delayed look but fail to submit a request for one, that look will be counted and you may miss out on a substantial amount of DHRB money you may have otherwise received if selected at that respective look. A special additional look request is a tool to petition the board to get another look after an officer has already received their third and final look. The request gets reviewed by the board and must demonstrate a record was unfairly considered in the normal board process. Examples of special additional looks that have been approved by boards in the past include: a second tour divo tells the reporting senior that they absolutely intend to separate, which impacts their trade average compared to reporting senior's cumulative average across that tour, even though they were a strong performer. The divo then decides they want to stay in, but didn't screen on their first, second, or third look because of the fit reps they received. They submit a letter of recommendation and explanation from that reporting senior with their special additional look request. Another example is an officer was de-screened by previous board action and has since made substantial improvements in the area that led to them being de-screened and have documentation to back it up. For instance, they failed multiple PFAs but since de-screening have passed them, or they lost the department head afloat recommendation, got de-screened, and have earned the rec back working on an afloat staff. If a special additional look request is approved, that record gets briefed and voted with the third look records. Special requests must be submitted to your detailer via email. Please do not submit these via the normal board correspondence submission process on BOL. We won't see your submission until after the special request board material has been consolidated and the delayed look requests have been briefed. Examples of both types of requests can be found on our division officer webpage here. If neither of the two special look requests apply to you, there still may be some documents we recommend submitting to the board. In order to know what to send into the board, you need to know what information is missing or might need to be explained in your record. The three places to check are all found via the BOL main menu. You'll want to check your Officer Summary Report or OSR, your Performance Summary Report or PSR, and your OMPF, Official Military Personnel File. When the board is voting your record, only your OSR and PSR will be displayed in the tank. You're able to view them in this similar tank format by selecting Generate PDF on BOL for each respective product. Let's look at this example first look, Year Group 19 OSR. First thing you should look at is your designator. If this designator says 1160 but you are SWO qualified, you will not be considered eligible for selection. You must send your detailer your SWO designation letter ahead of the board correspondence due date or submit it as a letter to the board on BOL. Next, you want to ensure any completed graduate or master's degrees are correctly accounted for under education. Same with awards. Missing education and awards are the most common issues on an OSR. The final area to verify on your OSR is your special qualifications. Keep in mind, SWIC and SWO do not have AQDs associated with them, so they cannot be added into your record as special qualifications. They have both been highly valued by previous department head boards, so if you have those quals ahead of the board correspondence due date, please submit those as letters to the board on BOL so they get briefed and accounted for. If you are in the middle of a PCS, your present duty station and present billet will be updated by the assistant recorders to reflect the billet you are inbound to. When you pull up your PSR, recommend scanning the dates first to ensure you're not missing any fitness reports. The PSR dates are written as year, month, date. So this first date of 190523 is May 23rd, 2019. The follow-on report should pick up on the day after the previous report closed out. If you have a gap less than 90 days, there's likely a letter of extension covering that time. Please verify if the letter of extension is in your OMPF or not. If it is, an assistant recorder will manually update your PSR dates for the purposes of the board. If the letter of extension is not in your OMPF, or you are missing a fit rep from your PSR, please use the link at the bottom of the slide to get your record permanently updated. Please also validate your PSR for accuracy compared to your fit rep hard copies. We'll use this first observed fit rep as an example. Your individual trade average is here, and the summary group average is here. Those numbers should match block 45 on your fit rep. There were 2 officers in the summary group, so between John Paul Jones and the other officer, both of their trade averages averaged out to be 3.58, meaning John Paul Jones was 0.09 above the average. Reporting senior's cumulative average, or RISCA, is not written on a fit rep and gets calculated 90 days after a fit rep closes out and is processed by PERS 32. Reporting seniors should closely manage their RISCA and should tell you what their RISCA is for your rank during your fit rep debrief. RISCA is the average of every officer they have ever completed a fitness report on in your rank. The RISCA on this report is the same as the summary group average because this reporting senior has only ever reported on these 2 ensigns at this time of report. The next report reflects a RISCA of 3.68 across 4 ensigns ever observed, which makes sense because this same reporting senior wrote reports on 2 ensigns previously and 2 ensigns on this report. Likely the same 2 ensigns, but John Paul Jones's trait average has now increased to 4.29 compared to the 3.68 RISCA on that second observed report. After you verify your fit rep data is accurate, ensure your promotion recommendations and PRT information are all correct. Here's a list of several other example letter to the board submissions. If you submit correspondence to a board, it will only update your record for the purposes of that board. You must follow the My Navy HR link on the previous slide to update your record permanently. Submitting correspondence to a board is a very quick process and is done via the ESSBD link on BOL. BOL auto-generates a formatted letter for you, so you just have to change the wording on the letter and ensure the correct enclosures get attached. Letters to the board have to be addressed in the tank by the board member briefing your record, so only submit information missing from your record or information that you want shared with all the board members. Board correspondence is typically due 10 days prior to the board convening to ensure the assistant recorders have time to get every record updated. This year's department head correspondence due date is 29 July. Assistant recorders arrive a week ahead of the board convening to ensure records are as accurate as possible. Assistant recorders are the only personnel who can update a record with information available in an OMPF or letter to the board submissions. Any change they make appears in light gray on an OSR and PSR so the board members know a modification has been made. Prior to the arrival of the assistant recorders, every record is reviewed by the PERS 41 team at least 3 times. We look for missing information so we can reach out to those officers and ensure they have the opportunity to update that information ahead of the correspondence due date. These reviews ensure every record is as accurate as possible ahead of the board convening and assures the board members that if information is missing from the record, every effort has been made to provide that officer an opportunity to correct the issue. We provide forceful backup to the best of our ability, but you are ultimately responsible for the accuracy of your record and should ensure your record is consistently board ready. During the PERS 41 record reviews, we also review the already screened records, looking for any de-screened tripwires. These tripwires apply to the department head, commander command, and major command boards. Once an officer screens for any administrative milestone, their record moves to the bank. Department head bank records get reviewed until an officer begins department head school. If a record trips any of these between screening and the officer reporting for department head school, their record moves to the decertification list for board action. Decertification records get reviewed by the board members, and it's up to the assigned briefer to find why that particular record was put in the decertification bank and make a recommendation on if that record should maintain its screening status or be descreened. After that briefer reads through the record, marks it up, and makes their recommendation decision, all decertification records get briefed and voted in the tank. On the first day of the board members receive training along with guidance from the board president. After all material has been presented and questions from the members have all been answered, they begin reading through and marking up records in the selection boardroom. Each board member gets randomly assigned records to mark up and grade. Board members are prohibited from requesting specific records to mark up and brief, but they can request a record be assigned to a different board member if they feel they would not be able to impartially brief that officer's record. The board member reviewing your record has access to everything in your own PF. They are not allowed to bring notes or writing supplies into the tank during the briefing and voting portion, so it's up to them to add any amplifying notes and grading justification to your OSR and PSR that they want to include in their brief. Briefers must assign a letter grade to each record before they can move on to the next record. Historical record grades are included here for transparency and to emphasize the importance that one fit rep or qualification can make, along with the significance of not having your SWO designation correctly reflected in your record. When an officer's record is getting graded at YCS 3 on their first look, there's relatively little information for a board member to pull from compared to the commander command or major command boards, so having an advanced qualification correctly reflected may improve a record by an entire letter grade depending on how it compares to the other records receiving that same first, second, or third look. The letter grades correlate to what that briefer recommends the other voting members should select on their handset. As the briefer is talking through their marked up record in the tank, each board member will be holding a handset and will vote a confidence factor for that record. The confidence scale ranges from 100 to 0, with 100 correlating to that board member being completely confident that officer should be selected, and 0 being confident that officer should not be selected. The records get briefed in the tank. The tank access point is secured during each voting session, and no specific discussions that occur in the tank can be brought up outside the tank. All personnel involved in the board must follow the strict confidentiality rules contained in the board precept and convening order. Board members can only brief what is in the record. All board members have the voting handset and a laser pointer, so if they want to draw attention to something the briefer missed, they can do so with the laser pointer at any point during the briefing. Last year's department head board consisted of 800 first look records, 220 second look records, 55 third look records, 100 LDO department head records, and 2,000 bank records. A record is displayed, briefed, and voted on quickly. The briefer continues to brief until the final board member has voted. A PERS 41 auctioneer announces how many remaining votes there are to ensure the briefer knows to continue briefing and to generally keep the voting process moving. Once the vote is complete, the overall confidence factor for that record will be displayed and announced by the auctioneer. In this 5 board member example, 2 board members voted 100, 175, 150, and 10. A 0 vote is a no vote. Any other vote higher than 0 is a yes vote. All of the votes averaged together generate the confidence score. The auctioneer would announce 4 for 65, meaning 4 board members voted yes, and all the scores averaged to be 65. That score is recorded electronically and manually in vote books by support staff before the head recorder moves on to the next record. Here's what the confidence vote looks like in the tank. I'll now brief an example record so you can see what information gets pulled by the briefer and how quickly the process goes. This example will be for a first look record and include 18 voting board members. This is my record. Letter to the board is his EAL qualification, which has been added by an assistant recorder in his special quals. I gave John an A and have already pressed 100. Let me tell you why. John has only been on board Stockdale for a year and already has his AIR and EAL qualifications. All his COs have nothing but glowing things to say about him. Let's take a look at his PSR. He crushes it on Mustin. #1 Divo, soft breakouts on every report. He's serving in one of the hardest and most trusted Divo jobs as commo throughout that tour. Before departing, Mustin tells us, this is a first look screener, no questions. Press 100 and let's move on, folks. He's above Riska on every report he's ever received, even the reports with extremely short observe time. Proven Divo rock star. I have no doubt John will be an outstanding department head. 18 for 95. The head recorder would now ask for the next record. This vote of 18 for 95 could mean 15 board members voted 100 and 3 voted 75, or 16 voted 100, 1 voted 75 and 1 voted 50, or 17 voted 100 and 1 voted 25. The yes votes and confidence scores are recorded prior to moving on to the next record. The board would continue until all first look records had been briefed and voted, which would include roughly 800 records. 800 records take multiple voting tanks to work through. A typical tank lasts an hour and consists of 100 records at a time. This ensures board members have an opportunity to mentally and physically recover between voting sessions and provides them the time they need to thoroughly review and mark records up prior to briefing them. After all first look records have been briefed and voted, the scatogram will be displayed to the board members. Here's an example scatogram for first look department heads. The left-hand column is selection status. The second column over is the confidence score. The third column is the number of records that received that confidence score. The fourth column is the total number of cumulative records listed from top to bottom to help board members understand how many records received 80 or above or 70 or above. You'll see shortly how that column assists in the selection process. The confidence scores and selection status are repeated to the right of the record totals. Board members are provided minimum or maximum selection numbers in the convening order that they read ahead of beginning the board process. In this example of 800 first look records, we'll say they are authorized to select up to 475 records. When the scatogram gets initially displayed, the board president will discuss how they'd like to proceed. After a thorough discussion, the president will open the floor up for motions to tentatively select or tentatively remove records from consideration. Any records that remain after all motions have been passed are considered crunch records, and the board then decides how they'd like to proceed. We'll walk through this scatogram example of 800 records to select 475. Board members typically begin the discussion utilizing natural breaks and outliers in the scatogram. For instance, the pattern on this scatogram reflects a fairly even spread of records, 90 and above, with a drop-off around 85. Fairly consistent spread between 75 through 60, and then a drop-off around 55. Large amounts of records with a confidence factor of 40, and then a decreasing pattern until you reach records with a confidence factor of 0. Some scatograms will have very clear patterns. Others, like this with a large amount of records, will be more difficult to discern. In this first look instance, the board knows that if a record gets selected, it should have earned a relatively high confidence score compared to other cohorts. Cohorts are categories of comparable selection records, such as first look or second look. If a record earned a 100, it means every single board member was in agreement that those records should absolutely be selected. If it earned a 95 or 90, only 2 or 3 board members weren't 100% confident that record should be selected. If a record doesn't get selected first look, those records have 2 more looks to be screened by future boards. If this was a third look scatogram, the discussion regarding which records should be removed for further consideration would likely be longer because the implication for those records to permanently remain unselected carries more weight for those unscreened officers. The other part of the discussion ahead of motions being made is talking through how many records and what confidence scale range is appropriate for the crunch. The board could make all maximum or minimum selections on this initial scatogram, but that's extremely rare. Leaving crunch records to get another look and re-examine a revised scatogram is much more common. Boards generally want a 2-to-1 or 3-to-1 selection crunch ratio. For example, crunch 6 records to select 3, or 9 to select 3. In this instance, we'll say the board has decided they intend to crunch, so B and C records get another review and vote, and they want to aim for a 2-to-1 crunch ratio. Boards vary on tentatively selecting records first or tentatively removing records from further consideration first. Look at the scattergram and understand the board's crunch intentions. I'll walk through an example motion process. Following a lengthy discussion, the president will say, "I'm ready for motions." One of the board members would initiate the first motion by saying, "I make a motion to tentatively select those records with a confidence factor of 90 and above." A second board member would say, "I second." The head recorder would now initiate a vote on that motion and say, "Mrs. President, a motion with a second has been made to tentatively select those records with a confidence factor of 90 and above. If you agree, vote 100 for yes. If you do not agree, vote 0 for no." Everyone would then press their vote. The head recorder would announce, "Mrs. President, the vote is 18 for 100, the motion carries. Mrs. President and members of the board, you have tentatively selected 396 records. You have 404 records remaining to select 79. The board would continue their discussion about how they would like to proceed, and once a general consensus is made, the president would announce they would like to open the floor for motions. A board member would initiate the second motion by saying, "I make a motion to tentatively remove from further consideration those records with a confidence factor of 55 and below." A different board member would say, "I second." The head recorder would initiate the vote on that motion and say, "Mrs. President, a motion with a second has been made to tentatively remove from further consideration those records with a confidence factor of 55 and below. If you agree, vote 100 for yes. If you do not agree, vote 0 for no." Everyone would then press their vote. The head recorder would announce, "Mrs. President, the vote is 18 for 100, the motion carries. Mrs. President and members of the board, you have tentatively removed 205 records from further consideration. You have 199 records remaining to select 79. The board would now discuss if they would like to continue with any further motions or not in order to refine the crunch record ratio. In this example, the ratio is roughly 2.5 to 1, and the board would like to crunch all 199 remaining records. The head recorder would then ask the president if they accept the scattergram. The president accepts the scattergram, and the board members now discuss in the tank how they would like to crunch the remaining records. Only the records that have neither been tentatively selected or tentatively removed from further consideration get voted on again in the crunch. Crunch options are dependent on the board and on the remaining records being crunched. The most common crunch option is for all remaining records to be reassigned to a new briefer, marked up, and briefed back in the tank by the new briefer. In our example, where there's a lot of records to crunch, this gives those records a new board member with a different perspective, and they get to decide if, after thoroughly reviewing everything in that record, if they agree or disagree with the initial briefer, and then they get the opportunity to brief their grade and justification ahead of the record receiving another vote. If there are only a few records being crunched, additional options include re-scroll the records and rebrief with initial briefer, re-scroll the records silently, then rebrief each record and vote, re-scroll the records silently and vote, either yes, no, or a full confidence vote. Following the crunch votes, the board members will continue with the scattergram process for that cohort of officers until all selections have been made. Here is a review of the overall board process. After all cohorts have been voted, scattergram processes completed, and tentative selects determined, the board members vote to confirm each set of cohorts. A debrief is conducted, and the board members and assistant recorders are sworn out. The board adjourns, and all board members and assistant recorders sign the board report. The board report is then routed for approval. Once the board report is routed and results are officially approved, they get posted along with the board convening order and board membership to the My Navy HR page here. Results from the last 2 fiscal years are also available on our SWO division officer page. Once an officer selects for department head, they become eligible to sign the department head retention bonus and compete for a talent management program. Officers should include one of these applicable screening statements in Block 41 on their follow-on fit reps to ensure the 04 board knows that selected officers who sign DHRB are due course and should be screened on their first look for promotion. Officers who do not select on their first or second look will have their third and final look the following year. Officers awaiting their third look may be held on station depending on their PRD until the board results are released. That's to ensure an officer doesn't slate to a tour they may be unable to complete if they are not screened for department head and proceed to a POCR board. Here are the historic department head board selection metrics from the last 3 boards. Superior performance at sea has consistently been the primary selection factor. Ship type and home port have not impacted selection. Boards have consistently wanted to see that officers performed well, regardless of the command employment or ship location they were billeted to. In summary, we reviewed the following topics: announcement message, determining looks and eligibility, special look requests, example correspondence, how to submit correspondence to the board, board process, selection announcement, selection and non-selection impacts, and historic department head selection metrics. Thank you very much for taking the time out of your day to watch this. Thank you for all that you do. Have a great rest of your day.